Most people know the ending of Braveheart. William Wallace, captured, facing execution, refusing to say the one word that would save his life, the crowd begging him to yield, his silence, and then that final cry. What makes that scene unforgettable isn't the dying, it's the choosing. A man who could see exactly what was coming and walked toward it anyway on his own terms. That story is set in 13th century Scotland, but there is another version of it, older and in some ways even more unsettling, that happened in China over 1,000 years earlier. The man's name was Kang, and instead of a battle cry, his final act was a piece of music. Kang was born in 223 AD, near the end of the Three Kingdoms period. If you think the world feels unstable today, consider what it meant to grow up in that era. Three rival states had been tearing China apart for decades. Millions had died. By the time Kang reached adulthood, one of those states, the Wei dynasty, was already being hollowed out from the inside by a single powerful family, the Sima clan. The Sima family didn't need to launch a coup. They were more patient than that. Over 3 generations, they slowly absorbed the real power of the empire while keeping the emperor on his throne as a figurehead. Everyone in the educated class knew what was happening. Everyone also knew what was expected of them. Pick a side, publicly, and make sure it was the right side. This is the kind of pressure that doesn't come with a sword at your throat. It comes as an invitation, a recommendation, a friend telling you that a certain position has opened up and that someone influential has spoken well of you. It comes as opportunity. And underneath the opportunity always is the unspoken condition. To receive this, you must become part of this. Kang was exactly the kind of person the Sima clan wanted on their side. He was the most celebrated intellectual of his generation. His writing was brilliant. His music was extraordinary. He was physically striking, tall and composed, the kind of person whose mere presence in a room changed the atmosphere. He had studied Taoist philosophy deeply and carried himself with a quality that contemporaries struggled to describe, something between serenity and total self-possession. He also had connections. He had married into the royal family of the Wei dynasty. He was close friends with some of the most influential men of his time. In a different version of his life, he could have become one of the most powerful figures of the new era. He chose instead to spend his days in a bamboo grove, drinking wine, playing the chin, writing, and smithing iron with his own hands. He and a small group of like-minded friends became known as the Seven Sages of the Bamboo Grove. They weren't hiding exactly, they were simply refusing to perform. The refusal became impossible to ignore. A powerful official named Zhong Hui came to visit Kang one day, accompanied by an entourage. Zhong Hui was a close ally of the Sima clan and widely understood to be testing the loyalties of prominent men. When he arrived, Kang was at his forge, hammering iron. His friend Xiang Shu was working the bellows beside him. Kang looked up once, said nothing, and went back to his work. He let Zhong Hui stand there for a long time. When Zhong Hui finally decided to leave, Kang spoke for the first time. He asked, "What did you come here having heard, and what are you leaving having seen?" Zhong Hui replied, "I came having heard what I heard, and I leave having seen what I saw." Both men understood exactly what had just happened. Kang had refused to acknowledge the visit as significant. He had treated one of the most powerful men in the empire as someone not worth stopping work for. The answer was going back to the Sima clan, and it was not going to be forgotten. Not long after, Kang's friend Shan Tao, who had taken a position within the Sima government, recommended Kang for an official post. He meant it as a kindness, a way to bring his brilliant friend into safety and relevance. Kang responded with a public letter. The letter, known as the letter breaking off friendship with Shan Tao, listed 17 reasons why he was constitutionally unfit for official life. He described his own flaws in deliberate, precise detail. lazy, impatient with ritual, unable to tolerate hypocrisy, incapable of the compromises that official life required. The letters circulated everywhere. Every person who read it understood what it really said. Kang was not just declining a job offer, he was making a public declaration that he would not be absorbed. He knew the cost of this. He was not naive. He had watched what happened to others who had refused too visibly, or at the wrong moment, or to the wrong person. He continued anyway. The immediate cause of his arrest was a dispute involving a friend named Lu An, who had been falsely accused and imprisoned. Kang chose to testify on his behalf, which meant directly entering a conflict that had powerful backing on the other side. Hui saw the opening. He went to Sima Zhao, the de facto ruler of the empire, and made the case plainly. Kang is the most influential intellectual of this generation. That kind of influence, if it cannot be directed toward you, becomes a threat to you. The empire will be better served by his absence. Sima Zhao ordered his execution. When the news spread, 3,000 students from the Imperial Academy gathered at the execution ground. 3,000. They knelt and petitioned for his life, asking that he be allowed to become their teacher instead. The petition was refused. Kang walked to the execution ground. He looked at the position of the sun, checking the time. Then he asked for a kin to be brought to him. The piece he chose to play was called Guangling San. It was one of the most complex and demanding compositions in existence, and Kang was among the very few people alive who could perform it. The score was never written down and never taught. When he died, it would die with him. He played it through to the end. The execution ground was silent. When he finished, he set down the instrument and said, "Guangling San is finished now." He did not say, "I have lost." He did not say, "Remember me." He said, "This piece of music ends here." And then he died. Here's what happened afterward. Shan Tao, the friend Kang had publicly broken with, the one who had tried to bring him into the system and been refused, raised Kang's children after his death. He watched over them, educated them, and years later, when the political situation had shifted, he personally recommended Kang's son Shao to the new court. In his letter of recommendation, Shan Tao wrote, "The son's talent is no less than the father's." Shao became a loyal official of the Jin dynasty. During a period of civil war known as the War of the Eight Princes, he personally shielded the emperor with his own body when the imperial guard had fled. He was cut down protecting the throne. The emperor refused to let anyone wash the blood from his robe. He said, "That is the blood of Shao. Leave it." This is where Kang's story parts ways with Braveheart and becomes something more complicated. William Wallace died for a cause, for the freedom of a nation, with a battle cry that could be passed on to those who came after. His death had a direction. Kang's death had no such clarity. He did not die for a political movement. He did not have followers in that sense. He died because he was constitutionally unable to pretend to be something he was not, in a world that required exactly that pretense. He died in some ways simply because he could not stop being himself. And yet something passed on anyway. Not through ideology, not through organized resistance, but through the quiet, faithful act of a friend who disagreed with his choices and mourned his stubbornness and raised his children and made sure his name was not forgotten. The world Kang refused to join eventually collapsed. The Jin dynasty that executed him lasted less than 50 years before being torn apart by civil war and invasion. The Sima clan's empire, built on absorbed loyalties and political performance, did not hold. Kang's music did not survive. Guangling San is gone. But the act of playing it survives. The image of a man sitting down at an instrument on the day of his death, performing something beautiful and difficult, and then saying, "This ends here," not with a plea but with a statement, that survives. Today, when the world feels like it is asking you to perform a version of yourself you don't recognize, when the pressure to adapt, to conform, to become useful to something you don't believe in, starts to feel like the only rational path forward, Kang's answer is not a strategy. It is not advice. It is not something you can simply apply to your own life. But it is a reminder that in the worst of circumstances, a person can still choose how they meet those circumstances, that the self is not infinitely negotiable, that there is something in a human being that can decide this far and not further. He didn't win, he didn't survive, he didn't even save his music, but he remained until the last moment completely and unmistakably himself. For some people, in some moments, that turns out to be the only thing that matters.